Did Putin just cross a line even Trump won't tolerate? You won't believe what's happening behind closed doors, and Ukraine's caught in the crossfire. Reports are surfacing that a serious rift has emerged between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, a relationship once characterized by a perceived level of warmth. But this time, it's not just about political posturing. The stakes are incredibly high, and the conflict in Ukraine is playing a central and potentially explosive role. So let's find out what the actual deal is. A notable shift in diplomatic rhetoric has emerged, with Donald Trump expressing strong dissatisfaction with Russian President Vladimir Putin's stance on the Ukrainian conflict. This change in tone followed statements by Putin questioning the legitimacy of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, escalating tensions and prompting a forceful response. In a recent interview with NBC, Trump expressed his frustration, stating he was very angry and peed off with Putin's pronouncements. He emphasized the potential for additional financial penalties on Russian oil sales if a ceasefire in Ukraine is not achieved. This move signals a possible departure from previous engagements, marked by an emphasis on direct negotiations.
President Trump sharing in an interview that he is very angry, even pissed, with his Russian counterpart after Vladimir Putin questioned the credibility of Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. For more on the war on Ukraine, former CIA chief of station and Fox News contributor Dan Hoffman. Dan, this was quite strong language, with President Trump clearly indicating that he's frustrated with where things stand with Putin. What's your read?
Yeah, he is absolutely frustrated. Look, President Trump has tried everything he could to entice Russia to come to the bargaining table.
The core of the dispute centers around Putin's questioning of Zelensky's legitimacy, a stance the former president argues directly hinders peace prospects. While acknowledging a prior, very good relationship with Putin, he asserted that a swift resolution depends on Moscow's cooperation. He further stated, "The anger dissipates quickly if he does the right thing." Putin's claims regarding the illegitimacy of the Ukrainian government hark back to the 2014 overthrow of President Viktor Yanukovych, which Moscow has repeatedly attributed to U.S. interference. More recently, Putin proposed a UN-administered transitional administration in Ukraine, a proposition swiftly rejected by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Zelensky, elected in 2019 for a 5-year term, remains the internationally recognized leader despite the absence of 2024 elections due to wartime martial law restrictions. Notably, while critiquing Putin's remarks, Trump had previously echoed similar sentiments, labeling Zelensky a dictator without elections on his Truth Social platform. During his campaign, he pledged an expedited resolution to the conflict.
I think he'll be okay. But if he isn't, I was disappointed in a certain way. Some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelensky, because when he considers Zelensky not credible, he's supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that. But I think he's going to be good. And I think Zelensky, by the way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems. Big.
Following his inauguration, U.S. negotiating teams held multiple meetings with Russian and Ukrainian counterparts in Saudi Arabia, discussing potential peace terms. Trump also engaged in direct conversations with both Putin and Zelensky. An agreement emerged on March 25th, calling for a cessation of military activities in the Black Sea and a 30-day pause in attacks on energy infrastructure. However, both sides have since accused each other of violations. A high-stakes call between the president and Russian President Vladimir Putin has resulted in a critical agreement, an immediate cessation of attacks on energy infrastructure within Ukraine. This move marks a potential turning point in the ongoing conflict, though key disagreements persist, casting a shadow on the prospects of a wider peace. The White House framed the call as a foundational step toward broader de-escalation, envisioning a comprehensive resolution that includes a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and, ultimately, a lasting peace. However, a complete 30-day pause in hostilities, a primary objective of the U.S. administration, remains difficult to track. The call, intended as a key step towards an end to hostilities, occurred only a short time before Kyiv faced another round of explosions and further air raid sirens were sounded. This further creates a complexity in understanding how productive this call was. The core divergence between the two leaders stems from Putin's unwavering preconditions for any peace agreement. These include an end to foreign military and intelligence support for Ukraine, demands Kyiv stubbornly opposes. The Kremlin has consistently emphasized these terms, including the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the 4 annexed regions, a renunciation of NATO membership, and a substantial reduction of Ukraine's military capacity. The president, in an interview with Fox News, directly contradicted the Kremlin's account regarding discussions on aid. "We didn't talk about aid," he stated firmly. "We didn't talk about aid at all." This discrepancy creates confusion about what was discussed and the overall understanding between the two leaders. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, addressing reporters, affirmed Ukraine's openness to proposals leading to a sustainable and just peace, while highlighting the imperative of transparency throughout the negotiation process. This emphasis on open dialogue underscores the complex challenges in achieving a genuine and lasting resolution. The agreed-upon pause in infrastructure attacks, while a significant development, does not address the fundamental territorial and security disputes that fuel the conflict. This partial agreement necessitates constant observation, as both involved parties and outside parties have the potential to violate it. The call occurred under immense global scrutiny, with hopes that the partial agreement will foster a space where proper peace talks may begin. The immediate bombardments following the call are a key reason why this situation must be approached with caution. To apply pressure, Trump has now threatened secondary tariffs on Russian oil, which, if enforced, will hinder entities from doing business within the U.S. if they purchase oil from Russia. He suggested 25 to 50% tariff ranges.
Called for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to be removed. It didn't go down well with President Trump. In his call with Kristen Welker, he said, quote, "You could say I was angry, pissed off when Putin said that, when Putin started getting into Zelensky's credibility, because that's not going in the right location." Trump also said that if he was unable to strike a deal with Russia on the war in Ukraine, he would impose tariffs on Russian oil. Trump later adding, "If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on oil, on all oil coming out of Russia." Hallie.
Experts like Keir Giles of Chatham House have raised skepticism about the efficacy of these threats. "We have seen sporadic threats by Trump to impose some kind of economic pressure on Russia, but they never last long," Giles noted, while adding this would represent a noticeable departure from his usual approach. The concept of secondary tariffs, as opposed to secondary sanctions, represents a less tested strategy. Trump recently imposed a 25% secondary tariff on U.S. imports from nations buying Venezuelan oil and gas. If implemented against Russia, this measure could significantly impact countries like India and China, major importers of Russian crude. In 2024, Russian oil accounted for 35% of India's crude imports and 19% of China's. Turkey is also significantly impacted, as 58% of their refined petrol imports in 2023 were from Russia. This policy choice signals a significant potential to redirect global oil trading patterns if implemented. The political landscape surrounding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine has taken a sharp turn, with former promises encountering the stark realities of international diplomacy. Efforts spearheaded by a team closely associated with the individual who once asserted a swift resolution to the crisis have encountered significant roadblocks, primarily stemming from Russia's uncompromising stance. Central to the issue are attempts to broker a ceasefire. To date, these endeavors have been consistently hampered. Russian officials, including President Vladimir Putin, have articulated conditions for any potential truce that have been widely characterized as demanding Ukraine's effective surrender and submission. This uncompromising posture has drawn sharp criticism from international figures. Putin continues to obfuscate, continues to drag his feet, stated British Foreign Secretary David Lammy during a recent press conference at NATO headquarters in Brussels. "We see you, Vladimir Putin. We know what you are doing." This statement highlights a growing perception among Western officials and experts that Russia's demands are intentionally designed to be unacceptable. The situation has generated increasing concern and frustration within circles close to the individual who formerly occupied the White House. This period has seen a markedly different diplomatic approach toward the Kremlin compared to preceding administrations. Those familiar with the negotiations have indicated a notable disconnect between the former promises of rapid resolution and the current state of prolonged stalemate. The fundamental point of contention lies in interpretations of acceptable terms for a ceasefire. While the efforts promoted by the team aimed for a swift de-escalation, Russia's preconditions, perceived as heavily skewed in its favor, have effectively prevented any meaningful progress. The significance of these developments cannot be understated. International analysts are closely watching how this issue will impact the ongoing conflict and broader geopolitical stability. The gap between initial expectations and the established realities of the negotiation process has a complexity of resolving such international disputes. The future course of the conflict hinges on whether Russia can be persuaded to adopt a more flexible negotiating position. However, indications thus far suggest a continuation of the current deadlock. The prevailing narrative, reinforced by the statements of figures like Foreign Secretary Lamy, paints a picture of deliberate obstruction. So, there you have it. Whether you agree with Trump's past approach to Russia or not, it's clear that Putin's hardline stance on Ukraine has created a lot of political buzz. We'll continue to follow this story closely and bring you the latest updates. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more political issues.